Good morning. I was raised by dandelions. One of my earliest memories is picking huge bouquets of dandelions for my mother. No matter how full my little 5-year-old fists were, there were always plenty of dandelions. I learned abundance and generosity. Dandelions were to reveal many more lessons as I grew. Dandelion greens in my salad, dandelion tea for my liver, all this food and medicine hiding in plain sight. This is the way you start to look at your life after reading Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Today's service, Skywoman and the Children of Eve, is based on the first story from this book. Kimmerer is an enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, a Native American people originally from the Great Lakes region. She has a PhD in plant ecology, is a mother, teacher, and writer. When I first heard the story of Skywoman, I was struck by how different it is from the creation stories I know. It didn't even have a deity, no god or goddess, no all-powerful, all-knowing being demanding obedience or worship, just a woman, some aquatic animals, and seeds. The story I grew up with in my illustrated children's Bible tells how God our Father created the world with a lovely paradise garden for us. But Eve, a foolish and disobedient woman, got us kicked out of paradise. The plants and animals weren't really important in this story. I'm not sure if I ever believed Genesis literally. Science had provided much more convincing stories, like the Big Bang and evolution, when I was growing up in the 70s. And yet, Skywoman's story made me wonder, just how much has that Genesis story shaped my world, the Western world? Robin Wall Kimmerer describes the differences in the stories this way. Quote, one story leads to the generous embrace of the living world, the other to banishment. One woman is our ancestral gardener, a co-creator of the good green world that would be the home of her descendants. The other was an exile, just passing through an alien world on a rough road to her real home in heaven. And then they met, the offspring of Skywoman and the children of Eve. And the land around us bears the scars of that meeting, the echoes of our two stories. They say that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and I can only imagine the conversation between Eve and Skywoman. Sister, you got the short end of the stick, end quote. When I went back to reread the adult version of Genesis through the eyes of Skywoman, I felt cheated. For example, from Genesis 3, after cursing Eve, God says to Adam, "Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life." This story is terrible. From misogyny to an actual curse that pits man against nature for all time, the children of Eve definitely got the short end of that stick. Whether people today believe the Genesis story, literally, metaphorically, archetypally, or not at all, this story has shaped our civilization for 4,000 years and is still fundamental to the religions of 3.8 billion people in the Islamic, Jewish, and Christian faiths. Now, I want to pause here. I cannot emphasize enough that this comparison is not offered as a judgment of anyone's religion or beliefs. As a matter of fact, people in these religions are doing their own work to reframe this story through the lens of creation care. That is their work. Ours is to flip judgment into understanding. These two stories, Genesis and Skywoman, side by side, shine a light on something which was hidden, which can help us understand ourselves better. Can you see the fingerprints of Genesis in our reactions to the climate crisis? It almost makes sense that a people in perpetual war with nature would not be concerned about one more battle. Knowing that they were created in God's image, they are confident that mankind will beat this one. The fact that we have drastically changed the earth, that's our mission, right? But Even those concerned about the planet and were worried about climate change are addressing it from within the Genesis paradigm. For example, Genesis people are about rules, obedience, and blame, while Skywoman seems to look more for balance and understanding. Genesis people look to the God-like minds of men for technological solutions. But how could any of us do otherwise? We have no collective story to show us another way. Even our science explanations are barely a few lifetimes old. But we must have been indigenous at some time. Where are those stories? In my 20s, I searched for these stories and discovered the goddess religions. The Venus of Willendorf, a 4-inch clay goddess figurine, is estimated to have been made around 25,000 years ago. Some images and figurines are dated 30,000 years ago. We can't be sure what those cultures were actually like, but they definitely seem female-oriented and connected to the earth and fertility. So, for 20 to 30,000 years before the Bible, we all did live closer to the Skywoman story. So what happened to our earth stories and cultures? According to Joseph Campbell in The Power of Myth, it took 2,000 years of brutal attacks from the Semitic tribes from the south and the Indo-European tribes from the north to wipe out these earth-based cultures. Campbell's theory is that as these were herding tribes and always on the move, seeking new land and coming into conflict with the people already on those lands, this sounds familiar, they brought gods of war and thunderbolts like Yahweh and Zeus. By 1705 BC, he says it was over. We live in the ruins of the Genesis story. We brought the world to the brink of habitat collapse. We can't seem to figure out how to live in harmony with our planet. We can barely figure out how to live in harmony with each other. But that isn't quite true, is it? We do know what to do. But like the characters in a Greek tragedy, we carry on in our doomed roles as if we have no choice. Why isn't science enough? Well, science is the language of facts and knowledge. The story is the language of wisdom, and story creates identity. Wisdom is what we seem to be lacking. How can we create a new story and find a new path when we're so many thousands of years removed from our own roots in nature? The answer is hiding in plain sight. Despite hundreds of years of oppression by Western culture, Indigenous people have survived, and they have something important to offer us. Indigenous peoples have been on the front lines of stopping new oil pipelines, such as the Line 3 protests happening right now in the treaty territory of the Anishinaabe peoples. The Anchuar people of the Amazon brought together Western leaders to form a partnership, the Pachamama Alliance, to help the West dream a new dream in order to save the Amazon. Even researchers at the Project Drawdown have identified Indigenous land management as playing a critical role in reversing global warming. As Indigenous people around the world lead us in action, they are also offering us their stories as a gift to save us all. The story of Skywoman is so comforting and grounded. Can we just take it up as our own creation story? Well, no. It does not come from our tradition, our experience, or our culture. We must create a new story for ourselves. But we can borrow some of the principles that Kimmerer shares from her tradition. 4 foundational principles to this worldview include, number 1, all our relations. The plants and the animals are our elders, here long before us, and if we learn to listen to their language, they can guide us. So imagine biomimicry infused with spirit as our default research. Imagine, more importantly, an end to species loneliness. 2, reciprocity. The earth takes care of us, but we must also actively care for the earth. We can see ourselves as partners and healers of the natural world. As we consume, we plant and nurture as well. 3, the honorable harvest. It's a set of principles that balance our need to consume with our relationship to our non-human relatives. Here are a few of the guidelines. Never take the first. Never take the last. Take only what you need. Never take more than half and leave some for others. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. It's almost too painful to think of our country if we had followed these few simple principles. The clear cuts that would now be at least half virgin forest, the species that would have never been fished or hunted to extinction, without thousands of pages of regulations. Looking forward, can you imagine capitalism with honor organized around these principles? Finally, her definition of indigenous gives us a path to citizenship. To be indigenous is to be of a place, to belong to a place, to know it and care for it so it's even better for our children and grandchildren. Kimmerer says we can learn to be indigenous, to fit ourselves to a place, instead of fitting all the earth to ourselves. With a new story, we could create a path to finally belong to this land. We could commit to harvest and consume with honor. We could see regenerative agriculture, not just as science, but as a relationship of reciprocity with all our relations. In my mind, Skywoman is the big sister. She takes Eve's hand and leads her back to Turtle Island. Skywoman says, "Your exile is over, my dear one. You're safe with me. But I need your help. We must work together, as our children have lost their way." How does Eve respond? How does Adam respond? Our actions are writing that story right now. Thank you.